When you drive onto that reservation, it's not like driving into another city. You're actually driving into a whole different culture, and you need to respect that.
For the officers around the state that are dealing with Native peoples, be a good listener. Hear what they're saying. Think before you speak, and accept where they came from.
I have always encouraged communications and active participation in building relations between the communities so that when something critical does happen, you have established relationships and you can both address the issues rapidly.
Many police officers believe, because they've been in California all their life, that you can go anywhere, do whatever you need to do to enforce the laws. But the reality is that the only reason you can come on a reservation is with the plenary power of Congress. It's the United States government that passed Public Law 280, allowing local law enforcement to enforce laws on Indian lands.
And the guy or the gal in the field don't really understand what Public Law 280 is all about. And therein lies a problem that's been sort of around for about a little over half century in California.
Yeah, peace officers, they can't know every law. It's just not possible. And you couple that when they go onto a reservation that now they have to be aware of all the different aspects of Public Law 280, it just makes it very difficult.
Normally, Indian tribes have their relationships specifically with the federal government, not with the state. Public Law 280 is really an exception to that arrangement. And police officers need to understand that when they enter into Indian country, they are undertaking a very special and unusual form of authority.
And I've been, working on Indian lands at various parts in our county through this process for over 36 years now. And there's always issues that come up that we have to just kind of stop and think about it. We don't have the answers for, or that we didn't occur to us, or we've maybe never dealt with. So it's an ongoing process, and it's rather complex.
If you partner with people, as we teach everyone in community policing, it makes the resolution of any issue, whether it's a crime or just a community concern, so much easier.
If people really believe, officers believe in community-oriented policing, there's no better place to practice it than in Indian lands.
Policing Indian lands in California presents unique issues and challenges. My name is Phil Constantine. In addition to my 20 years with the California Highway Patrol, I'm an author, historian, and a member of the Cherokee Nation. Even with my background, I find policing Indian lands a complicated subject. Let's get started with the recent history of American Indians and how this impacts law enforcement. The years between 1943 and 1961 were known as the termination era in federal policy toward the nation's sovereign Indian tribes. During this period, Congress's goal was to eliminate tribal governments, assimilate individual Indians into the dominant culture, and reduce the federal government's economic and political assistance to American Indians. One of the laws Congress passed to accomplish these goals is Public Law 280, or PL 280. This law required California to replace federal law enforcement and assume criminal jurisdiction over all Indian lands. Because California's Indian tribes opposed assimilation and were not first consulted by Congress, they strongly objected to PL 280's implementation. And to this day, many Indians consider law enforcement officers to be intruders on tribal land. Furthermore, Congress did not fund the state's new obligation to police Indian lands. Consequently, law enforcement agencies often neglected to implement PL 280. As a result, in many instances, PL 280 weakened law enforcement within Indian country. Today, attitudes toward Indian tribes have shifted dramatically, and federal Indian policy favors strong relations with tribes conducted on a government-to-government basis. Yet, PL 280 remains the law and requires local law enforcement to enforce California's criminal laws within Indian country. While the exercise of PL 280 jurisdiction is often a source of conflict between Indian and non-Indian communities, with this training we will look at ways to make this relationship work. Key areas include tribal sovereignty, limits on state authority under PL 280, concurrent jurisdiction, cultural competency, building relationships, law enforcement responsibility, and cooperative policing. It's important for California peace officers to understand the concept of tribal sovereignty and how it affects the enforcement of state law on Indian lands. In this segment, we will discuss the definition of Indian country, the definition of tribal sovereignty, public safety and Public Law 280, and agreements between tribes and local law enforcement.
Indian land is actually defined by the federal government in one of the statutes. And basically, to avoid any kind of confusion, it is all the land within the boundaries of a reservation.
That's regardless of who owns the land within those boundaries. Doesn't matter whether it's a right-of-way that is a state right-of-way. It doesn't matter whether it's private property owned by a non-Indian. If it's within the boundaries of a reservation, it is Indian country. Indian country includes a second type of territory, and that is any trust allotment, that is land that is owned by the federal government in trust for an individual Indian. And that is Indian country wherever it is located. Even if it's outside the boundaries of an Indian reservation, a trust allotment is Indian country. There's a third type of territory that is Indian country. It's referred to as a dependent Indian community. This is land that is not necessarily within a reservation. It may not be a trust allotment, but it's land over which the federal government has exercised some form of protective authority, and it's a place where Indian people live and have a relationship receiving benefits and otherwise with the federal government.
Tribal sovereignty is probably one of the most difficult concepts to explain, especially in our country. It's very difficult for members of our society to understand that our country is a sovereign, states are sovereigns, and yet within the states we have sovereign nations. The Indian nations were recognized in the Commerce Clause of the Constitution. They are indeed sovereigns, and that really means that they have the right to self-governance. They can create their own laws, they can create their own rules, their own policies, and within their reservation lands they have total control over that.
Here you are in California, and there is a separate nation, a nation of Native Americans that need to be treated on a government-to-government basis, rather than simply a constituent of your jurisdiction. That you are actually, and in some ways, it's good to understand you might be entering another country. So frequently I ask myself, and actually people don't realize that, when they come onto the gaming facilities, that they leave California and come on, in our case, to the sovereign nation of the Hopland Band of Pomo Indians.
A sovereign nation is our inherent right for us to govern ourselves and live within our laws and live within our cultural ways, and that we can still teach the young natives about how we lived and tell the stories, let them know the history, and still do the things that, that our ancestors did.
PL 280 transferred most of the federal government's criminal jurisdiction over Indian country to California and gave Indian citizens the right to receive law enforcement services from local governments to the same extent as other citizens. Under PL 280, states shall have jurisdiction over criminal offenses committed by or against Indians in Indian country to the same extent that the state has jurisdiction over criminal offenses committed elsewhere within the state. And the criminal laws of the state shall have the same force and effect within Indian country as they do elsewhere in the state. However, it did not take away tribal criminal jurisdiction, and some tribes have established their own police departments as a result. Because PL 280 removed most federal jurisdiction, the federal government maintains no police presence within Indian country. States have criminal jurisdiction over all crimes within Indian country. Tribes maintain concurrent criminal jurisdiction over all Indians. However, most tribes in California do not exercise this authority and leave it up to local law enforcement.
Before Public Law 280 was passed in 1953, the law was that states had no criminal jurisdiction over Indians on reservations. Congress passed Public Law 280 in 1953 to give the state of California and several other states jurisdiction that they would otherwise not have. That is, the authority to prosecute crimes against Indians on reservations within the state. This law was passed at a time when the federal government was trying to shed many of its financial responsibilities and to cut the federal budget. It was also a period of time when the policy of the federal government was to force Indian people to become more assimilated into the non-Indian society.
Officers should be aware of Public Law 280 because it's what really provides the legal authority for them to cross that exterior boundary of an Indian reservation and provide law enforcement services to the members of that tribal community. And a lot of times they're going to get confronted with, you don't have authority to be here. And so understanding that they do, in fact, if they are investigating a crime, that they have the authority to be there.
The type of law enforcement that they're engaged in is unlike any other that they're engaged in the state of California because they're engaging in law enforcement within the territorial boundaries of another government. It's not just important that they understand Indian people and their culture. It's important that they understand the intergovernmental relations that Public Law 280 establish.
If deputies are seeking additional information on tribal issues or Public Law 280, they can always turn to the district attorney's office, or they can go through their own chain of command.
You can't take my child. His home is here on the reservation.
I'm taking him
Listen
right
to
now.
me. His home is here on the reservation. The reservation is his home.
I'm taking my son with me
You
now.
can't take him off the reservation.
I'm taking him now.
You're not even a tribal member.
I'm taking my son with
You
me.
can't take him.
I know that. We'll get that all cleared up.
She's not even a tribal member.
Hello, Madam Chair. It's good to see you again.
Good afternoon, James. Thanks so much for coming.
You're welcome. Do you know what's going on here?
Well, my son and his wife have been arguing all morning, and my daughter-in-law wants to take my grandson off the reservation, so it's just a big argument.
Okay. Do you know if anyone's hurt?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Any weapons involved as far as you know?
No.
Okay. We'll go ahead and talk with him.
Oh, thanks so much.
Rich, I'll talk with her if you want to talk with him.
Okay.
Okay, thanks so much for coming.
You're welcome.
Hi, I need to talk to you about what happened. Just stand over here so I can talk to you. Excuse me. All right, tell me what's going on.
My wife wants to take my child off the reservation.
Jimmy, I see that you have an injury on your face.
He hit me.
He hit you? Are you hurt anywhere else?
No.
Do you need medical treatment?
No.
Okay. Any weapons involved in this? No. How did he hit you?
With his fist.
With his fist? Did you hit him at all?
No, I'm just trying to leave. I just want to leave.
I apologize, but I hit her in the face.
Okay, what did you hit her with?
My hand.
Okay, was it open or closed?
Just kind of open-handed.
All right, was it your right or left hand?
It's my right hand.
All right, excuse me for just a moment. Stay right here. Yeah.
She's claiming that he hit her and she has an injury. They have a child together. Anything he says?
Yeah, he said he hit her too.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and arrest him.
Okay.
Excuse me, sir.
Mm-hmm.
What's your name?
Corey.
Hi, Corey. Corey, my name is Deputy Blanton with the Sheriff's Department. I was talking to your wife with her. She's got an injury on her face, and she says that you punched her. You said the same thing to my partner. I'm required by law to take you into custody for domestic violence. So if you can turn around and put your hands behind your back.
Wait a minute. What are you doing? Why are you taking him into custody? You should be taking her. She's not even a tribal member.
Okay, well, I'm required by law to take him in custody for domestic violence.
There's also ICWA, also.
Okay, ma'am, I don't know what ICWA is, but I'll be back and talk with you in a second.
That's
okay?
not fair.
Come on, sir.
It's not
Suzanne, stop. Calm down. This is not a ICWA situation. This is a domestic violence, and they're going to handle it. We'll have to deal with it. So it'll be okay.
It's okay.
I know.
I know.
All right, if you can just face right here. Hey, Rich, I'm code 4 with him. If you want to go talk with some of the witnesses and take some of their statements.
Okay.
Thanks. Do me a favor and spread your feet a bit, a little farther. All right. Do you have any weapons on you?
No.
Any illegal drugs?
This scenario shows that domestic violence on Indian land is handled just like domestic violence that occurs anywhere in California. The officers also heard a reference to ICWA, or the Indian Child Welfare Act. This law only applies when the court has taken a child away from their parents. It does not apply to peace officers on scene. This issue will be discussed in more detail in the next segment of this training.
Conflict that the deputies and that officers will have when they get into a domestic violence on the reservation is, number one, there are a very quiet, closed culture per se. This is embarrassing, just as it is for many other people. But culturally, they would like to try and take care of it themselves. But under state law and the reporting issues and the mandatory reporting for police officers, they must take action.
It's a little different than what it is in the public, because when you roll in on the tribal lands, there's a lot of relatives that are within doors of each other. And so when you go in and handle a domestic violence, say, you're not only dealing with the two people that are in there maybe in a small family, but then you have the outsiders coming in. So the officer has to be very aware of his surroundings, because you can be surrounded by a lot of people that aren't happy with you being there.
Many of the crimes that occur are perpetrated by relatives. Many of the tribal members are related by family and some by marriage. And you will find that there is a closed door with many of the witness statements in trying to conduct an investigation, because they don't want to see their uncle go to jail. Or they might get pressure from another cousin that don't you dare talk about that particular suspect. However, what I've also discovered is that they do have a sense of justice. They know what's right and what's wrong. There has been a lot of apprehension on the part of natives to accept and trust law enforcement. And if that deputy can get on the reservation and start and establish a working relationship with, again, not just the council members and tribal police officers, but with the council and everyone involved, he will have established himself as a friend first and maybe a law enforcement officer second.
For Public Law 280 to work successfully, it's important for local governments to work together with tribal governments to address the issues of policing on Indian lands.
We acknowledge that Public Law 280 is not a perfect law. It's a law that both sides agree neither one wants. But since we are stuck with Public Law 280, we need to come up with solutions, ideas, and implement those solutions, ideas to make them work. Ultimately, both sides agree on one thing. We want to improve the quality of life on the reservations, build relationships, and establish partnerships.
We at the AG's office began to go from county to county, offering to facilitate and assist building better relationships via local collaboration development. And we've had some tremendous success with that. And we've seen in the areas where we've had the collaboration groups built up that the tribal people do feel much safer in their own homes because of the good relationships that have been established and enhanced between justice officials and tribal governments. They can be anything from just an informal gathering to an actual memorandum of understanding. And that would be up to the local officials and the tribal officials as to how technical they want it to be on that. The officers in the tribal governments are elected. They are much like other governments. The constituents have the ability to choose who they want to sit in office. And then, after they are in office, it's extremely important that California and local government officials recognize that type of authority. We recognize that the tribes do have justice issues, and like any other group, we want them to know that they have an open door at the Attorney General's office. And we also want the sheriffs and the district attorneys to know that they also have an open door to come and discuss their concerns about public safety in Indian country.
I think a lot of people don't realize that when you drive onto that federal land that you've just submitted to the sovereign authority of that tribe. Well, along with that is another part of it that tribes prize and protect very closely is sovereign immunity. And as I mentioned, it's one of the things that's limited the expansion of law enforcement on reservations is that some of the counties in California are requiring that tribes provide what's called limited waivers of immunity. where they agree to, if we're going to give you cross-deputization, that you waive your sovereign immunity to allow you to be sued if there is a liability issue that occurs. And there's been a real reluctance with tribes to waive their sovereign immunity. And that's not any different than the states or federal government. You know, the tribes have a right to say who can sue me and who can't.
Frequently, when a call for service comes from Indian country on a reservation itself, a responding deputy may have questions as to what his authority and jurisdictions are as he enters the reservation. Probably the most important thing for that deputy to be thinking about is public safety first.
Under case law interpreting Public Law 280, legal jurisdiction on Indian lands is divided between tribes and the state. The state was given jurisdiction over criminal prohibitory laws such as murder, rape, assault, and arson that may occur on Indian lands. The tribes retain jurisdiction over civil regulatory laws such as vehicle licensing, workers' compensation, and building codes on Indian lands. In this segment, we will examine the limits on state authority under PL 280 and what it means to peace officers. Key areas we will discuss include criminal prohibitory versus civil regulatory, wildlife jurisdiction, housing and land use, motor vehicle issues, and the Indian Child Welfare Act.
Public Law 280 gave states criminal jurisdiction on reservations, but Public Law 280 did not do the work of ending tribes as government. Quite the contrary. Public Law 280 envisioned tribes remaining as effective governments for their people. What that meant is that Public Law 280 had to allocate responsibility between the state and the tribes. And the courts have had to draw the line between the authority that the state did get and the authority that it did not get. And the line that the courts have drawn is a line between what they call criminal prohibitory jurisdiction and, on the other hand, civil regulatory jurisdiction. The state did receive criminal prohibitory jurisdiction under Public Law 280. It did not receive civil regulatory jurisdiction. But drawing that line is not entirely easy. And the way the courts have tried to help us understand that distinction is to say that the criminal prohibitory laws are laws that are strongly invested with a public safety dimension, and they are laws that are always enforcing a public policy against the behavior in question. On the other side, civil regulatory laws are laws that are addressed to conduct that is sometimes allowed under certain conditions and not allowed under other conditions.
Understanding the difference between a prohibitory and a regulatory law is tossed around in court back and forth many times, but I can give you a good example of it. On Indian country, a tribal member does not have to register his vehicle. That's considered a regulation of California law. However, if that same Native American and tribal member committed an assault on another member, that's prohibited. That's prohibited by the law and could be enforced by the state and local law enforcement.
For the criminal prohibitory laws, the state does have law enforcement authority on the reservation with respect to Indians. The tribe may also have that same authority, but the state has it as well. With respect to civil regulatory laws, only the tribe has authority. The state does not have authority with respect to those laws involving Indians on reservations.
What you have to look at, if I'm an officer in Indian country that I patrol it, I'm probably going to make myself a cheat sheet just like you do any place else, the most common types of calls that you get in Indian country, and to know whether they're criminal violations or civil.
But there's also lots of voids with the whole criminal prohibitory and civil regulatory nature of things in Indian country in a Public Law 280 state. And what I see a lot of tribes doing now is establishing their laws, based off those voids where, county ordinances don't apply, obviously municipal codes, a lot of the vehicle code.
When officers are responding to Indian lands or to tribal issues or problems, and they don't have an idea of what they are getting into regarding a civil or criminal issue, ask. You can always ask one of the tribal officials if they're there. If it's something that's happening that right now, usually there is someone that will be able to help them out. And if the law enforcement officers have developed some relationship with the tribe ahead of time, not at that critical moment, but ahead of time, by all means, they will have been given that information on what they can do and what they cannot do.
52 Paul 1, can you start a 415 ATV at the Tall Pines Reservation?
Rider, stop your bike, step to my car, please.
Step on over my car.
What's going on?
I got a disturbance call about your loud motorcycle and you're not wearing your helmet.
I'm on the res, man. I don't need a helmet.
I understand. You have to wear a helmet when you're riding a quad no matter where you're at. Okay? You live here on the res?
I do, yeah.
Okay. Step over to the car real quick. I'm going to pat you down, make sure you have any weapons or anything. Okay?
I don't have any weapons.
All right. Just spread your feet real quick. I'm just going to make sure because I'm by myself, all right? You have an ID with you?
Yeah.
What's your first name?
Mike.
Okay. Mike, why don't you get your ID out for me? Where do you live here on the res?
Just up that way.
Okay. Your parents' house?
Yeah.
Okay. And this is your quad here?
Mm-hmm.
You have registration paperwork or anything?
Not on me, no.
How old are you?
19.
19, okay. 52 Paul 1, can you start tribal police for an evaluation on a helmet violation?
Come on, you don't have to call them.
52 Paul 1.
This is. Let me explain why I'm here, okay? I'm here because of a disturbance call because your bike's loud, you're not wearing a helmet, and tribal police deal specifically with the problems on the reservation, such as helmet violations and things like that, speeding, okay?
All right.
All right?
All right.
Just kick back for a little bit and they'll be here in a minute.
Okay.
All right. You know him? You stamp with him? Mike right there?
Hey Tom, how's it going?
Hey Jerry, how's it going?
Outstanding.
Hey, got a disturbance call and came out here and contacted Mike here. Not wearing a helmet, riding his quad up on the tribal land. Just wanted to see if you guys knew him or had dealt with him before in the past.
Yeah, I dealt with Mike before. I cited him for a safety code violation, not wearing his helmet before.
Okay.
I know this guy very well, so.
Okay. Here's his ID, and I've already patted him down.
Outstanding, thanks.
Okay.
I'm gonna end up citing him for the safety code violation. Hey Mike, how's it going?
Brooks, good. How are you?
Mike, you know the routine already.
No.
I've cited you before for the same piece of safety code violation.
No, I forgot. I forgot my helmet.
Well, this is what's gonna happen, Mike. I'm gonna go ahead and cite you again. And you have to appear in tribal court within 30 days.
I have to go to court?
You have to go to court.
Come on, can you just give me this one? I won't do it again, I promise.
No, Mike, it's part of the violation you committed, and I'm gonna have to cite you for it. You still live here, right, Mike?
I do.
You good?
I'm good, thanks. I appreciate it, Tom.
Thanks for the help.
Thank you too. Okay, Mike, here's your ID and your cite. Do you want me to give you a ride home? Pick up a helmet so you can pick up your quad?
Yeah.
All right, great. Come on, Mike, let's go to my patrol car.
So the sheriff's deputy responded to the call, and when the sheriff's deputy encountered the individual and found out from the individual's tribal ID that this was a tribal member, the officer then contacted tribal police to get tribal police to come to the scene and to deal with the situation. The county officer understood that the activity involved, that is, driving without a helmet, was a civil regulatory matter and therefore within the tribe's exclusive authority. This was a matter to be handled by the tribe.
The positive part of it was the relationship and the cooperation between the deputy sheriff and the tribal officer, and the deputy willing to wait for the tribal officer to find out what his limitations are and what the jurisdiction is for that particular situation.
On reservation lands owned by tribes or individual Indians, hunting and fishing are within the jurisdiction of the tribes, not the state, although some violations of tribal law can also be a federal crime.
Public Law 280 withdrew most federal criminal jurisdiction that is based in Indian country, but it did not withdraw all federal criminal jurisdiction. There are still some individual federal offenses that apply specifically to Indian country that still operate in Public Law 280 states like California. One of those laws, for example, involves trespassing onto Indian lands to hunt or fish in violation of tribal law. That is a federal crime. So the federal government still has some Indian country law enforcement responsibility in California, even though California is a Public Law 280 state.
When you're speaking of housing issues, that's something that's specifically part of the tribe's jurisdiction, because the tribe has housing codes, and as I would like everyone to know at this point, the police officer, local sheriff, whoever he or she may be, again, cannot enforce tribal housing ordinances. So that's exclusively left up to the tribe. Land issues as well. By way of a hypothetical, however, let's assume that the tribe has a housing code and there's an eviction to take place. Well, the local law enforcement really cannot get involved in the eviction as if they would in a non-Indian off-reservation situation. What our local law enforcement officers have been doing, in this case our sheriffs, is that they will be notified that an eviction is taking place on the reservation, and they will come literally while the tribal police evict, stand by to see that the peace is kept.
Motor vehicles on tribal lands are not regulated by the state if they stay on tribal lands.
If you know, Vehicle Code Section 4000A is an unregistered vehicle or vehicle with expired registration. If it's a person who lives on the reservation and they're driving on the reservation, because the court has determined that that's not criminally prohibitive but civil regulatory, you can't cite for it. Now, if a non-Indian is driving through the reservation and he or she has an unregistered vehicle, the officer can cite. But you can't cite an Indian living on the reservation for an unregistered vehicle, period, because it's looked at as civil regulatory. The same thing with driver's licenses. You can't cite for a 12500 or a 12951, which are expired license and or failure to have a license in possession, if they live on the reservation and the car is on the reservation and the event leading up to this happens on the reservation.
Another issue is the Indian Child Welfare Act, which was established for the protection of Native children and the preservation of tribal culture.
ICWA, which actually stands for the Indian Child Welfare Act, was a law that was enacted actually to preserve the tribal cultures, because many Indian children had been removed from the tribal homes and put into non-tribal cultures, and basically the Indian tribes lost their culture because they lost a whole gap, generations of their children. This law was enacted to protect the tribes in that manner.
For the deputy sheriff and the police officer, if you're facing an issue of child custody or whatever, you should follow the policy and procedure as you do now. If you're going to take a child into custody under 300 W&I, call Child Welfare, Child Protective Services, and give the child to them. They're the ones that need to or will deal with the tribal entity over placement of the child and stuff. They may turn the child over to them, but they'll have the policies and procedures for that.
In this segment, we will discuss how concurrent jurisdiction affects peace officers. Concurrent jurisdiction is simply overlapping jurisdiction between government agencies. For example, when a crime is committed on Indian land, local law enforcement and tribal law enforcement both have jurisdiction, and both can conduct a criminal investigation.
The sovereignty issue and Public Law 280 impacts the policing issues for both tribes and the state of California by putting them in the position of having concurrent jurisdiction over those criminal issues on those lands.
We have concurrent authority in many circumstances in the United States, especially because we have both a federal government and state governments. And there are many offenses, for example, drug offenses, where federal law creates a crime, and so does state law. The authority that the two governments have may come from separate sources. The authority of county officers comes from the state law of California. The authority of a tribal government to deal with the same activities by an Indian on the reservation comes from the tribe's own inherent powers. And there's really no difference between the situation of concurrent jurisdiction between tribes and the state versus concurrent jurisdiction between the federal government and the state. In both of these instances of concurrent jurisdiction, the law enforcement authorities need to figure out ways to allocate responsibility and work together cooperatively, efficiently, and sensitively.
The fact that you have both sovereigns having laws and statutes that may apply on this one single area does create an confusion for both entities, both tribes and the states themselves. So it's necessary for both of them to sit down to have agreements and talk about where those areas are, conflicting and where they need to work out and become more clear about what their roles and responsibilities are.
Yeah. Really good. Really good.
That's doorbell. I think they're here.
Okay.
Hold on. Officer, this is my cousin Storm.
Hi, Storm.
Hi.
I'm Tom with Tribal
Hi, Tom.
Police. Tell me what happened.
Yes. Last night I was in my room, and I heard this loud bang noise, and so I got up and to check what was happening because it was an unusual noise. And when I came into my living room, I saw Joe Valdez standing in the middle of my living room with a bat.
Did he try to hurt you with the bat?
No. As soon as I picked up the phone, he took off back. And
Has he ever threatened you before?
He threatened me earlier that day.
Where at?
At the casino. Last night, I couldn't call the police. I thought I'm scared of the retaliation of the family. Then this morning, when I was talking with my cousin, she said, "Well, just call the cops. You know, it's about time we stand up to that family." And
okay.
So that's
well, this is a very serious violation of tribal law, but it's also a violation of state law. I'd like to call the sheriff's department and have a deputy come out and take your statement.
Okay.
Tribal Police 503 on county call.
Go ahead, 503.
Can you start a deputy en route to my location for a report of a 459 burglary?
I just
10-4-503.
They don't bother me or do anything.
Can't let him get away with it.
You did the right thing by calling the police. I'm going to wait outside. The deputy will be here shortly.
All right.
What you sit down.
Here.
See.
I try so hard, to be good to everybody. And
Come on in, Jim.
So what's going on, Tom?
We had an unreported burglary here last night, but it's also a pretty serious violation of tribal law that I'm going to need to investigate.
Okay, well, why don't you come in and we can talk to the victim at the same time?
That'd be great.
It's the best thing you did by calling the police. Here, the officers are here.
Storm,
all right.
this is Deputy Ward. He's here to take your statement.
All right.
How do you do?
Okay.
Officer Cook here told me you may have had a burglary here last night. You want to sit down and tell me what happened?
Yes, please. Yes.
Is here okay?
Yes.
All right. Why don't we start off by you just starting from the beginning and tell me what happened. I'll get all your other information later.
I heard a loud noise last night.
That's about what time is this?
That was almost midnight.
Okay.
And
midnight.
when I opened the light, I saw Joe Valdez standing in the middle of my living room.
Joe Valdez is someone that you know?
Yes, he lives on this reservation.
He lives on the reservation?
Yes.
What was he doing in your living room?
He threatened me earlier that day.
Earlier that day, he had threatened you? Okay. To physical harm against you?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
And so you think he was back to carry out that threat?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What was he doing here that makes you think so?
He had a bat.
You had a bat?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
He attack you with that or anything?
Well, I grabbed the phone and I was going to call the police.
Okay.
And as soon as I grabbed the phone, he took off.
Oh, that scared him.
Yeah,
Okay.
he took off.
But you didn't call the police last night?
No, I didn't call. I was scared of the family because of the retaliation of the family. And
I see. Okay. And then this morning you decided...
And then this morning I spoke with my cousin, and she told me it's best that we deal with this and to
Okay.
charge him. And
All right. You could recognize Joe if you saw him again.
oh yeah.
Okay. And he doesn't live here, right?
No.
And he has no purpose
he has no
of
right
being in your
or
home?
Anything? Yes.
Okay, so, well, what you're describing to me is residential burglary, which is a serious crime, okay? It sounds like Joe may still be on the reservation. I'd like to contact him if I can. I'll be back to talk with you again, as long as you're okay now and you're with your cousin, okay?
Yes. Yes.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Hey, Tom, you know who she's talking about?
I know Joe Valdez pretty well.
Okay, you think you know where he's at now?
I have a pretty good idea where he's at.
On the reservation?
Right.
All right, why don't we get a couple more deputies out here and go see if we can contact this guy?
Sounds good.
All right.
The tribal police have a right under their government to conduct an investigation for their appropriate tribal law or federal law. And the local law enforcement agency also has a right to conduct a criminal investigation for prosecution under state law. So that is what we term to be concurrent jurisdiction, and that's why it's so important that agreements and understanding and relationships between not just administrators, but the line officers themselves, the local deputy, the tribal police officers, have to have good relationship together so that they can conduct their appropriate investigations without interfering with each other and instead assisting one another.
Hey, Tom, how's it going?
Good. Hey, remember that Valdez case from a couple months ago? How'd that go over in court?
Well, he ended up pleading guilty to burglarizing Storm's house. What happened on the tribal court side of it?
Tribal court banished Valdez and took his family's per capita for 1 year. That's a lot of money.
Well, that ended up working well for both agencies.
Yeah, it did.
I'm glad we worked together on that. That made it easy to find and arrest him.
Same here.
Hey, listen, I got to go write a report, so I'll catch up with you later.
Take care.
See ya.
Resolution was extremely successful. The officers at the end were actually surprised that the tribe was able to take some sanctions that the criminal justice system was unable to take.
When law enforcement partners with law enforcement from another agency or even another sovereign nation, the results are positive. As we saw that the state of California had a profound effect on the suspect, and that tribal government had a longer-lasting effect on the family that was creating a problem.
With concurrent jurisdiction, it's important for local law enforcement and tribes to work together and establish agreements that address these issues.
The first thing that any police officer or deputy should do when they have a beat and you have shared jurisdiction is meet that people. I've worked in jurisdictions where there's been lots of federal agencies, whether it's Department of Defense, your Postal Service, your Social Security guy, they have guards and stuff. Meet them to see what goes on, what are they there for, what's their purpose, so you better understand what's on your beat. So if you have some sort of security or enforcement, tribal police, select officers, they're officers. You stop in, you share, you meet with your deputies all the time. Now, just because you meet with them doesn't mean you're going to agree with them all the time. Traditionally, city cops and county cops, where there may be friends, but it's like a county sheriff will stop a drunk driver in the city and then ask you to take it as the city cop. You say, you catch them, you clean them. So you have those little disputes.
If the patrol deputy out there who has that daily contact with that tribe has a question about what their limits might be or what their authority might be in non-critical situations, doing crime prevention measures for the tribes, my suggestion would be for that person, if they're having that daily contact and that's their beat, is to have that conversation and sit down and have a cup of coffee with the tribal staff, with the tribal leaders, and just introduce themselves. Say, this is what I'd like to do for you folks. How can I do that for you? Are there limits that I have here, and I'd like to work with you and know what the limits are so that we can help you. And then go back to his own agency and say, hey, you know, I've discovered this and I think we can help them out, and we'll be able to be proactive in that area where we may have been experiencing burglaries or vandalism and those sorts of things.
The federal judicial system is not set up to handle the types of crimes that occur on an everyday level. They're best at prosecuting RICO statutes, multi-kilo cocaine importation cases, and all these other federal crimes which we hear about in the news, especially of late. But the street domestic violence, the hand-to-hand sale of some methamphetamine is best handled at the state level. And so when the officers and the tribal officers conduct their concurrent investigations together, assisting each other in a crime, they need to see which prosecution is most viable. In most cases, you'll see that the state prosecution is.
As law enforcement professionals working off the reservation, things very rarely are black and white. We want it black and white, but it's not always black and white. Often we're scratching our heads, looking through the penal code, calling a supervisor, you know, because we know something's a crime. We know we got this guy and we can charge him for something. If it's that way off the reservation, there's no way you can expect it's going to be black and white on the reservation. And that's where the two different jurisdictions really got to get together, roll up their sleeves, approach us together and work cooperatively to hopefully solve some of the problems where there are maybe those voids in jurisdiction.
To successfully police Indian lands in California, it's important to understand the unique culture of the tribes in your area. The best way to develop cultural competency is with community-oriented policing and positive communication. Key areas of this segment include the tribal lack of trust in the U.S. government, the differences between tribal people, and what do tribal councils expect from law enforcement.
Being a police officer, you're functioning in one direction. You go out and you handle calls. You have to try to understand their culture and some of the problems and animosity that they've had against government over the years.
You've got to remember that here's a population that for 400 years was lied to, cheated, and sometimes enslaved, and somehow through all of that managed to survive. I mean, everything within the history of the United States, particularly during the 19th century, was to eradicate, eliminate the native population. I mean, the population, if I have my figures right, went from something like 22 million down to less than 2 million at one point in a very short period of time. There is within that some sort of culturally developed trauma that's passed on from generation to generation.
And so we know how our ancestors lived and how they survived and how they had to run and hide, you know, when the Europeans came. You know, it wasn't easy for us. You know, we were herded and we were hunted.
When the federal government decided they wanted to change the Indian culture, they started coming to the reservations and taking the young people and taking them away to the white man's schools to teach them the white man's ways. I don't like to say that, but that's what a lot of the elders would say. And so the Indians had a fear of the law enforcement when they would come.
And when you went to Indian school, and they didn't shut the last one down until I think sometime in the 60s, you couldn't practice your religion, you couldn't speak your language, you couldn't be an Indian, which is everything you were born into. This psychological, historical trauma, if you will, has been carried on over the generations, and people have to live with it. And you, as an officer going in, have to realize that. Whether you know it or not, you're not the person that I want to associate with, because you represent, as an officer, everything negative that's happened to me, my father, and his father over the last 200 or 400 years. It's not like the melding or the blending of other ethnicities that live within the community. These are people who have, for hundreds of years, been isolated, are remote, who have their own culture, own tradition, own ways of life.
We were just brought up, different, and sometimes we were very rural. And, and we did live off the land. We always lived off the land, and the fishing and the hunting, and then when the Europeans came, and, we didn't always have boundaries. And this is what, it's really hard for us to have boundaries, and so we didn't always stay within those.
When I first started, I worked out here in the Morongo Basin area and had to deal with American Indian issues off the Morongo Basin reservation there. And being 100% Native American, it was still difficult for me to go onto that reservation in a patrol car. I did have some trust back then with some of the local tribal leaders, but I had to gather that by myself.
Winning the confidence and trust of the people in Indian country is a slow and deliberate process, and that's part of how you'll succeed as an officer in doing that, in properly and honestly policing Indian country, winning the trust and confidence. It doesn't come easy.
I think one thing to really keep in mind when you're dealing with community members on the reservations, just the uniform itself or the black and white vehicle can be a complete put-off. Even as a tribal police officer, it takes new officers several months to build up that trust that the community as a whole or even individual members might have the trust of that chief or the sergeant or the department collectively. But when they see that new face, they want to build that relationship, even with their own officers.
There are many tribes in California, and they don't all have the same history or culture. It's important to be aware of the differences between tribal people.
It's very important that law enforcement, when dealing with the law and within the law, is also cognizant of the cultural backgrounds of the tribes that are in their district. Now, every tribe has a different culture and a different history, so it would be difficult for one size to fit all.
What people tend to do, non-Indians, is they tend to lump everybody together. And that's just totally wrong. It's untrue. It's like saying, because all Europeans are alike. And you can tell, a European could be someone from Ireland versus someone from Italy. There's night and day. You may go to one reservation and you may be able to do this, and another reservation that may be a total taboo. And it's up to the individual who's going to police the Indian country to make a point of learning what those are.
Tribal people typically are quiet and reserved. They're not ones to immediately respond and give information. They're very careful, and they think through what is going to be the spoken word. So a law enforcement officer may become irritated because he's not getting the answers quick enough. If he was familiar with that tribe because it's in his area, he would know that this person tends to speak more slowly, is thinking through the facts before he presents them, and that would make the relationship better. Another example would be some tribes, their leaders don't make eye-to-eye contact. That is something critical. That is part of their culture, and they have very significant reasons for that. And yet law enforcement may not understand that and think that the tribal person is trying to hide or conceal some information. If a homicide is committed on tribal land, tribes want to immediately, or as soon as reasonable, bless Mother Earth. This is part of their culture, part of their tradition. The tribes are very much aware that they can't just walk onto a crime scene, that evidence has to be preserved, that there has to be a procedure that law enforcement goes through. But they would appreciate when, as soon as possible, a clear path could be provided so that they can do a blessing of Mother Earth.
There are things in terms of officer safety that, will really create a problem for individuals. Give you an example. Sometimes a tribal member will have some type of a medicine object. Even the things I'm wearing, people should ask permission before they touch them. And so one of the first things that can create a problem for you is if you're booking an individual and they have some type of sacred object. Sometimes it's a medicine pouch or a bag around their neck or hung on their hip. And you can actually create that physical confrontation to where people get hurt, because it's very sacred to touch a bag like that without permission. A lot of times, they wonder, they're out there doing an investigation and all of a sudden the information dries up and nobody's talking to you, and you wonder what happened. Well, there's a thing that we always talk about where some Indians, they have a practice historically and even today called traditional settlement, where the offender and the victim the families may get together on their own and settle up their differences in a traditional way. And a lot of times people wonder, well, what happened? All of a sudden the victim and the suspects are not talking to each other or not talking to me. And so being aware that those kind of things exist even today, again, will help, because a lot of times what will happen is that line officer will jump to conclusions and think that the person has been forced to not talk anymore. They call it threatening or dissuading a witness crime. And when in fact what's really happened is maybe the families have gotten together and settled it in a traditional way. Within our culture, the things about food and a lot of departments have a thing about gratuities, where they prohibit you accepting anything from anybody. But I can tell you that officers that are assigned to work on tribal lands need to be aware that if they're in especially a victim's home and an elder offers you a cup of coffee or they offer you something to eat, that you accept it, that you do not turn it down, because in fact, what we say is you better have a real fat wallet, because you just insulted the cooks and the elders and everybody in that home.
In the tribal communities, I've found that the immediate family usually extends out to cousins, uncles, aunts, second and third cousins. So that immediate family is much larger. If a deputy is responding to a serious call such as a domestic violence, there's usually a lot of those immediate family members there. They need to realize that this immediate family is part of the immediate family and not offend somebody by telling them they have no business being involved in this. If they tell this second cousin they have no business being involved in this, it would be very offensive.
There may be somebody who's committed a criminal act on tribal land that needs to be arrested by state law enforcement, and there might be a hesitancy among some of the tribal members to step forward. It could be in part because of fear of retaliation, but also it could be an uncomfortable inner feeling that we don't want to expose and reveal a blood relative.
Too many times law enforcement officers become badge heavy, that they realize they have a badge on their shirt and they have a gun on their belt and they're the authoritarian and they've been taught to control the situation when they arrive on the scene. And that isn't necessarily received well, especially by the elders. There's something even more, I think, important in addressing that, is for the officers to really develop listening skills. You'll notice that the elders will begin a conversation, or many of the elders will, and almost go around the bush getting to their point. And you need to sit down, be quiet, and listen to what they tell you, because they tell it to you once. And it's usually very pithy, and it's very meaningful. And I've always found it to be cooperative.
Even if you have a search warrant, which gives you the absolute authority to enter that tribal member's home and conduct your search, there's a way to do that, And in California and even Oregon, there are gambling drums that only men are allowed to handle. And so if you've got a female officer that goes in there and grabs that drum, it might cause that drum to be destroyed or it could create a physical altercation. There might be some feathers or eagle feathers or other sacred objects, prayer items that people pray with, that you just don't walk over and grab and pick up and move. You ask permission. Is it okay if I move this? Can I pick up these things and move them because I need to look under this particular item? Those, again, are officer safety things that will really create problems. But to me, it's a real investment in the tribal community for the person to take that kind of time to be sensitive that even though they have the right to be there and to do that search, that there's a way to do that search and to do it with respect. And that's the bottom line that I try to encourage here is to give respect. Because if you give respect, you're going to get respect. The other part that I think is important with law enforcement is what I call evidence-based investigations, where you don't just put all the pressure on the victim, especially in domestic violence cases, to try to get information from other people, neighbors, family members, to try to take the pressure off of that victim. And then to be aware that there are some really strong ties that the female victim has to the land, to the family, to the reservation. And so for them to accept the normal domestic violence services often doesn't occur because they won't leave. And so they wonder, well, gee whiz, here this person is the 10th time that they've been injured and they're not leaving. Well, you need to understand that there's a whole lot more going on there with that domestic violence victim than maybe other victims that live in urban areas.
Domestic violence in Indian country is certainly more so in Indian country than it is in other places per capita. That's not anything new. Indian country is fully aware of their domestic violence rates, their homicide rates, their child abuse rates, alcoholism, drug abuse, diabetes. Everything is higher. Native Americans are incarcerated 38% higher than any other racial group that there is. So they understand, they know the feeling, and they want to address those things. So why the family is a tight, close-knit unit, they want to take care of their children. So when you come as a police officer, if you attack one, you're attacking all. And that's not untrue in other places, but is exceptionally strong in Native American lands.
I try to encourage officers when they knock on the door, don't knock the door off the hinges kind of door knock. You know, you think about, you knock in the middle of the middle of the doorway there, and you lightly knock, and then you step back away from the door. You don't want people, figuring that you're crowding them, because we're really sensitive about spatial distance. Everybody has an aura about them that's a comfort zone. I guarantee you, Indians have a big aura, in terms of that sensitivity. And you just don't get in that space, without creating a fight or flight kind of a situation. I know a lot of times people aren't comfortable sitting down, as an officer. They think about officer safety. I can't sit down, kind of thing. But I encourage that, and to be sensitive again. You got a chair here. Do you mind if I sit here? You're talking to an elder. Be all right to sit here, and you get their permission. It's always better to have that informal kind of relationship.
Yeah, one of the important things I think the new deputies should understand is the fact that when one of the Native Council people or somebody is following you around and asking some questions and being involved in the case that you're investigating, that you should understand that there's a reason why they're there. They have a job to do also, and hopefully by watching this video you're going to be able to understand why they're there. And one of the reasons is that they have to go back and they have to report to their council and let them know what went on in this incident. So if you can help that person out, you're probably going to build a better rapport with those people down the road. So if you have to go back again, you'll have people you can contact and they'll be able to help you out in any incidents that may arise after that.
Practical things I recommend is that the deputies get out into these communities. They meet the tribal council members. Not only that, they get out into the communities and make sure that they take time to go to some of the functions that the tribe has on their reservation and meet the people and build this trust that is long overdue.
Most tribes do not have a written language. And such, how are we going to tell our story? Well, it's by storytelling. And it's by me passing on to you, my son or my daughter, things that have happened over the years the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so as part of that culture, the storytelling is a huge, huge component of that culture and letting you know about the history of our people. And so when you start hearing tribal members talk about certain things, it's the way they communicate, not through a written language per se as much as it is about history telling and what they've been told and what has been handed down to them generation after generation.
Now let's look at what tribes expect from law enforcement.
What it basically boils down to is the law enforcement community serving us in a fair, respectful, and unbiased manner. We fully support, just like the rest of society, we support law enforcement because they have a Herculean task to do, whether it is off reservation or on reservation. We recognize that. But what we also expect is them to be like us. They are not our adversaries. They are a part of us. As Sir Robert Peel said, the police are the people and the people are the police, and we absolutely believe that.
As our community, it's a small area, and we want to have a working relationship with our local law enforcement, and there is a need of having getting some services from them. Just give them to meet with our people, especially our children. Because it's inherent from the parents and the grandparents of all the past, of all the law enforcement, what they've done to them. And as for us, we just want to build that relationship with the local authorities, because if you start with the children get asked more questions of working with the community, and then have more of visits to our children and have a more understanding of our culture.
When the officer does come on our reservation, yes, he should just slow down and, wave to the kids, talk to the kids. And we are very sensitive people, and so they need to know that they need to just come in and smile and be friendly. And most of the people that come to ours, they do know the people, and they know the council and the chairperson. And so we work well together. I'm proud to say that.
I've spent pretty much my entire career as law enforcement and as a tribal chairman trying to advance this relationship between my people and the greater society in general. For the law enforcement officer, it's absolutely imperative that you develop this relationship and develop this awareness, because you work with our people day in and day out. It's important you understand the nuances. I would not, and neither would any tribe, expect you to understand everything there is to know about the 108 federally recognized tribes in the state. But there are some things that are unique to the tribes that are in your area. Once you become culturally aware of the tribes in your area, believe me, it will pay off in dividends, because it will make your job much easier. You'll be able to handle your job without having to worry about whether you're offending someone by what you do or you say. You'll be able to go in and act quickly and effectively, and from an officer safety standpoint, that's paramount in getting your job done.
This segment is about building relationships between tribal governments and local law enforcement. We'll get started with an example of a successful government-to-government meeting.
This is a quarterly meeting that the San Diego District Attorney's Office, the Sheriff's Department, and all the tribal leaders have that we meet to communicate, to discuss issues that may come up. Because in our county, we have 17 federally recognized tribes. This meeting that we have is a great opportunity for San Diego County law enforcement personnel to network with the tribes that we have here. And because not only does it involve tribal leaders from all of the tribes, but it includes their councils, perhaps their attorneys, tribal law enforcement officers, gaming commissioners, everybody that deals with the government of the tribes.
This government-to-government relationship where the chairperson and the council personally know the district attorney and the chief law enforcement officer, the sheriff in that county, has really paid off quite well as far as intergovernmental workings and acknowledgement of each other.
We've been doing this for some time now, and while we still have issues, the key is that we've resolved so many issues, and we bring them in these meetings to the forefront. We get to openly, in a non-threatening manner, tell the sheriff or speak with the district attorney about our concerns, and then what they do is they'll look into these. And that's that communications, that relationship building.
Thank you. I have a question for the Sheriff's Department. I'm seeing a more and more increase of orders coming out of the tribal court for evictions. And we have tribal law enforcement on a lot of the reservations now. And what we've been trying to do is contact the sheriff to have them there to sort of keep the peace. And I was just wondering if you could describe for me what that would entail. If you're on sort of just your on standby to make sure that the peace is kept, but what would that involve?
Okay, what it would involve is we've had this run before with another tribe. In fact, the area station was put on notice that there was going to be an eviction. We did not know the time. We knew the rough date. But the deputies who were in that beat knew what was going on. When they got called by communications, they showed up and attempted to keep the peace of those coming on the reservation and between the folks who were being evicted and the tribal law enforcement that were trying to evict them. There is the tribal court here that at least that tribe went through. So as far as the Indian Civil Rights Act, all of those were checked off. The problem is this, is that we do not have, as you know, the jurisdiction on the property issue. Congress has given that to the tribes and not to California state peace officers. So we have to stand there, look at the tribal court orders or look at the council orders and say, we just don't have jurisdiction here, but if you can go ahead and process the eviction peacefully, we will stand by. But there's not going to be any physical violence here.
Right.
And
But what if there was? I guess, would you initiate an arrest? Let's say if the tenants that were moving out, our law enforcement officers are there, they're escorting the people out, and it
breaks down into, it's going to be just like any other case in any other part of the county where you have an assaultive conduct type of case. We're going to take the witness statements. If the deputies have seen the action, they will then also be a witness, and they'll act accordingly to what they perceive or what they see. But the issue is going to be, can tribal law enforcement grab a hold of and forcefully move the evicted person out, or is that a battery?
Right.
And so that's the problem we have. And it gets down to that finite point, but we do and we will preserve the peace much as we did in the other case. Yeah, Guy, Captain Chambers, you can talk a little bit about it.
Don Chris? Or Don?
No, our station, hi, Guy Chambers, Lemon Grove Sheriff Station. Yeah, our station was involved in just that incident in Hamul Village. We went out there and we preserved the peace. And that's all we did. At one point, it did almost get out of hand, and when it did, we took action, but it was on the action on both sides. The thing we did, what really helped us out with not only the citizens of Hamul, but Indian Village, we met with them prior and kind of laid down the law, not laid down the law, but kind of discuss their concerns and our concerns of what we can and what we couldn't do. And it did work out. It was a slight skirmish, but I think in the long run it got handled. We brought in the DA's office to look at it, and it came out successful on our end and very peaceful for not only the citizens of Hamul, but also the Hamul Indian Village. But like John Madigan said, it's a very sensitive issue for law enforcement, and it kind of puts us in a bad spot. But it's okay. That's what we're there for. We're there to preserve the peace, and we will always do that.
And speaking with some representatives from the state level today, they were telling me how far we've come and how ahead of things we really are relative to so many other areas of the state, so many other counties. And it all revolves around that relationship building, that communication, that community-oriented policing concept. Everybody's bought into it. There are no yes men or women here. Everything comes out, and we deal with it.
For good relationships, it's best to designate a law enforcement liaison to communicate with tribal leaders. And it's important to maintain relationships even with a change in tribal government. It's essential for officers to know who tribal leaders are. A good way to accomplish this is for tribes to provide photos and a list of names so officers can recognize tribal leaders when responding to calls.
When I came in office in 2003, and our past council was working cooperatively with our local enforcement, they formed a group. And, with the city and the county, the CHP, the fire department, and just, talking about emergency response and how can we work with tribes on this.
We have good relationships with the sheriffs and the fire departments. If we call them, they come. We're not waiting, a long time or anything. And, I think they respect us and we respect them.
I think what's really interesting is in Riverside County, we have been working with tribal liaisons that were appointed by the Sheriff's Department. And they have been coming out to every tribe. They have been explaining to the tribes what information they need to make a more positive working relationship. As a result, we've put together booklets that tell us about the tribe's history, the tribe's culture. It has pictures of tribal leadership. It shows locations of various buildings. Some of them show the contents of those buildings. There's chemical storage so that if there was a situation, the officers would be forewarned about entering a building that could be extremely dangerous. The other thing that we found out is it's really hard for law enforcement to know who they're talking to when they go on a tribal reservation if they haven't established a relationship. So some of the tribes in Riverside County are now ordering and wearing what they call first responder vests. And these are bright orange, neon color, so that if there is an incident, the officers in charge, the tribal council, can put on their vest, and officer immediately sees that they are somebody with authority that can direct them, that can help them in a situation.
One of the things that we've done is we've created a orientation for Native American communities where the tribal members are invited to participate in this 2.5-day orientation where they are given a basic of what the Sheriff's Department does, what their responsibilities are, the processes that we follow as far as shooting policies, use of force policies, even showed them how to do a complaint policy. So if they're not satisfied with the service that we are providing, there's a recourse for them to take as opposed to becoming frustrated and disenchanted with law enforcement.
Our relationship with the county sheriff has come a long ways in the last 3 to 4 years. In the past, we've had some rocky roads, some rough waters, but I think with the communication, the dialogue opening up, and the Sheriff's Department realizing that these aren't just tribal officers that the tribe is labeling police, they're actually trained, backgrounded, legitimate police officers, is kind of let their guard down and has allowed us to come to the table and really start rolling up our sleeves and working on these problems together. All of our officers meet the same minimum requirements. Post applies towards agencies, all other agencies, state agencies throughout California. Not only do they go through the basic academy, their in-service training mirrors that. Anything from perishable skills with their defensive tactics, firearms, right down the line.
Law enforcement's responsibilities can differ depending on what type of arrangement tribes have with the state and if they have tribal police. In this segment, we will look at 3 different examples of policing on Indian lands. The same scenario will be played 3 times with 3 different examples of law enforcement's responsibilities. The first scenario is with no tribal police and no security. Second is with tribal police. And the third is with tribal police who are SLEC officers, or officers with a special law enforcement commission.
When a deputy sheriff or even a city policeman goes upon Indian country, they're going to encounter different levels of tribal law enforcement. The first and foremost is that there is none. Many of the smaller reservations cannot afford to have a tribal police department, or they have only a security staff. And that legal status is definitely different. Those people are allowed to enforce tribal law, not state law. There's questions even whether they could enforce any federal law. The next level is when a tribe will actually, by ordinance or code, establish a tribal police department. The federal government, particularly the FBI, recognizes a tribal police department without anything else as being a viable and accredited police department that allows us access to National Crime Information Center, criminal histories, and the like. Now, that level of tribal policing, where the ordinance has just established them, they also enforce tribal laws. That brings us to the next level, which is a tribal police officer that has a special law enforcement commission with Bureau of Indian Affairs. This expands a certain amount of our responsibilities and authority. We're still tribal police officers, but with this special law enforcement commission, it also gives us credibility and the opportunity under certain circumstances to enforce federal law and arrest people for state violations, again, under many different circumstances.
Other examples of special law enforcement commissions might include officers who are specially commissioned to deal with federal laws relating to airport safety or military security or homeland security activities. These are simply ways in which the federal government can magnify its law enforcement authority by drawing in other agencies and giving them federal commissions.
There is one more level of tribal policing, and that's what Hoopa has in the Yurok tribe up in Northern California. The sheriff has deputized them as reserve officers. That's covered under 830.6 of the Penal Code, where a designee from an Indian tribe is appointed as a reserve police officer. They needed to do that because of the wide expanse and just the vastness of the reservation up there.
This first scenario takes place on tribal land and is an example of a tribe with no tribal police and no security officers. Where California laws apply, peace officers have the authority to handle criminal offenses.
52 Paul 1, respond to the Tall Pines Reservation. Possible caser, person unknown to the area. Black 4-door SUV.
52 Paul 1, 10-4 en route. What's going on, man?
Hey.
What are you doing parked here in the parking lot? Let me see your hands. Stay where you're at. What's your name?
John.
John?
John Bear.
Okay. What are you doing parked over here?
Just waiting on a couple friends.
Okay, are you a tribal member?
Yes, I am.
What are you guys doing over here?
They were going to do some target shooting.
Okay. Is this your car?
No, it's not.
It's not your car?
No.
Okay. Are you on probation or parole or anything?
Yeah, I'm on parole.
You're on parole? Okay, go ahead and spin around, put your hands on your back for me. I'm just going to pat you down and do a quick parole search, okay? I'm going to handcuff you. Does not mean you're under arrest. Spread your feet. Anybody else in the car?
No.
Okay. You have any problem with me searching your car?
It's not my car.
It's not your car? Okay. Where are your friends at?
I don't know. That's why I was waiting for them.
Okay. All right. Come take a seat in my car real quick. Take a seat in here. Watch your head sitting down. Scoot your feet in. All right. Okay, John, let me get your full name and date of birth.
John Bear. John Allen Bear.
John Allen Bear, spell it for me.
That's Jon.
Jon.
All. En. Bear. Bear.
Bear. And your date of birth?
It's April 9.
49.
1968.
68. Okay. Sit tight for me, okay? Watch your feet. 52 Paul 1 on inquiry.
52 Paul 1, go ahead.
52 Paul 1, can I get a 29 both ways, 4th and L1 check? Subject last of Bear, that's Baker, Edward, Adam, Robert. First of John, John Ocean, Nora. Middle of Allen with the DOB of 496868. Should be on CDC parole.
52 Paul 1, copy.
10-4, and I have a 10-16. John, why didn't you tell me you had a gun in the car?
It's not mine.
It's not your gun?
No, it's
Whose
not.
is it?
It's friends.
Okay. You know you're on parole and you can't have guns, so you're under arrest right now for being a felon in possession of a firearm.
Yeah, but it's not mine.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about that later. Right now, you're going to go to county jail with me, okay?
Yeah, okay.
Sit tight.
This deputy did a great job. This deputy treated this crime just as he would a crime in any other community. He had a felon in possession of a firearm and ultimately made the arrest on the suspect, who was a felon and who was breaking a criminal law.
Law enforcement officers have the right to make that felony arrest on tribal land, even with a tribal member.
This second scenario is an example of a tribe with a tribal police force.
Hey, John.
Hey.
Hey, you know, you're in an area that's not authorized even for tribal members.
Yeah, you know, there was some cones over there in the road, and I kind of took a wrong turn, sorry.
Okay. What are you doing down here?
I came to hang out and, you know, shoot some targets with some friends.
Still on parole, right?
Yeah.
Do me a favor, turn around, put your hands behind your back, lock your fingers together. Great. Hey, do you have anything illegal inside the car?
It's not my car.
Okay. Hey, listen, you're on under arrest. I just need to detain you for a few minutes.
Yeah, okay.
Come on back here with me. Tribal Police 503 on county call.
Go ahead, 503.
Can you start a deputy to my location for a felon in possession of a firearm?
Copy, 503. We'll contact sheriff and request a deputy respond to your location.
Hey, Cook, what can I help you with?
I got a parolee in possession of a firearm.
Okay.
I'm going to issue him a citation for a violation of tribal law.
Okay, and you found the gun in the car?
Still there.
If it's okay with you, we'll handle the arrest. I'll collect the gun and get him transported back to the station, do the booking, and get him sent off to jail.
That sounds great. Thanks a lot.
I take a look at the gun.
I think this was a very good relationship in that the deputy handled his investigation once he responded. The tribal police had already detained the individual, did not make an actual arrest, but a detainment for public safety.
In that situation, the deputy may want to go ahead and take the arrest and set the felony charges through the state courts. It's a lot easier that way. The tribal police, they may not even have their own court system. It may be harder for them to file federal codes if they don't have their own court system.
This last scenario is an example of tribal police who have a special law enforcement commission. Select officers have the authority to make an enforcement stop and make an arrest.
Hey, John, come here. Stop right there. What are you doing here?
I just came to do some target shooting with a buddy of mine.
Target shooting. You know you're in an unauthorized area, even for tribal members.
Yeah, I know. There was some cones in the road over there, and I got turned around. Sorry.
Okay. You're still on parole?
Yeah.
Okay, do me a favor. Go ahead, turn around real quick. Put your hands behind your back. Interlock your fingers. Don't move. Spread your legs. You have anything on you I need to know about?
No.
Okay, is this your car?
No.
It's not your car?
No.
Well, you're still responsible for all the contents in the car. You understand that, right?
Sure.
Okay. All right, John, come on, let's go step over to my vehicle real quick. Watch your head, John.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, John, just to let you know, you're not being under arrest, you're just being detained.
All right.
Is there anything in the vehicle I need to know about?
I told you, it's not my car.
That's fine, you have nothing to worry about then. Whoa. (501) Tribal Police to county call.
501, go ahead.
Can you send a deputy to my location? I have a felon in possession of a firearm.
Copy 501. We'll contact sheriff and request a deputy respond to your location.
Jerry, what can I help you with?
Tom, just to let you know, I have a felon in possession of a firearm.
Okay.
It's a violation of federal law. We prefer him be prosecuted through the district attorney's office.
Okay. If it's okay with you, we'll handle the arrest. I'll collect the gun and get him transported back to the station, do the booking, and then when we get to the station, I'll do the parole hold.
Great.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay.
In this particular case, you had a tribal officer who had a special law enforcement commission from the federal government. Not every tribal officer has that special law enforcement commission. We call it a SLEC officer. This officer would have the authority to make an arrest under any federal guidelines if a federal law is broken. And in this particular scenario, that's exactly what happened.
A lot of places, because they do have select authority, they picked up a lot of federal laws, the tribal police do, that they can investigate a myriad of things. But if you have casinos, a lot of theft of property from the casinos or embezzlement and things like that, and your select officers have the role of investigating those things. Tribal lands where I'm at, most of the law enforcement individual who are / tribal police, they only have civil authority. But when they go out on a family disturbance, they might try to handle that themselves and then call the county sheriff in. And the sheriff's office may get tired of going out there because they don't have enough to arrest. Well, our tribal police have civil codes. And if the deputy just explains to tribal police that he's getting tired of coming out and say, hey, can you take some action on your own, most all of them have rules and regulations for the proper conduct. They have the sovereign right to control the conduct of their tribe. And they may say, no noise after 10 o'clock. They may say, swearing to an officer we will not tolerate. And they can fine them civilly. And in Indian country, you have some unheard of fines for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for doing things that we could just write a ticket for, that we couldn't even incarcerate them on.
A lot of deputies don't realize that tribal government, everyone within that organization is accountable to their tribal council, their employees, their members themselves. And tribal councils within the reservations have a lot of authority and power to the point where they've actually banished members from the reservations and taken their per capita from them.
Another policing example would be agencies that have public service contracts with tribes, similar to many California cities. It's important to check with your agency on possible MOUs with tribes in your area.
Well, we actually have 2 memorandums of understanding with 2 of the tribes in our county. One is the Hupa tribe and the other is the Yurok tribe. We felt that deputization of Hupa tribal officers that met California Post standards, as long as we could guarantee certain things among ourselves, the tribe and us, that was a good thing for us, because having these agreements, having tribal police working with our deputies, really was a good fit for us. As part of that process, we insist and we work together with them to make sure that their officers maintain post standards just like our deputies do, that they're getting the advanced officer training. We even include tribal officers in our training section. There we keep records with them, and they go to training with our officers. We schedule them working with the tribe, so they attend range, use of force, anything that we would insist that our deputies, sheriffs receive. The tribal officers go to the training with them. We keep training records on that, and we work with the tribe to ensure that they are staying up to post standards, and we feel comfortable that they are qualified, well-trained officers working with us.
Next is an example of effective communications that build good relationships.
Very recent past, in the area where I work, one of our local police agencies was in a pursuit of a vehicle, and it was a possible armed felon in the vehicle. This pursuit went on to the reservation in our area. Officers from that police agency continued the pursuit onto reservation lands. By the time they got to reservation lands, there were also deputies and a sergeant involved in this pursuit. The suspect abandoned the vehicle while on the reservation and ran into a river area. We had a lot of law enforcement officers with weapons on the reservation at this time. Once the scene was contained, I responded to the reservation, went to tribal council, and explained to them why we were on the reservation and what was going on. They were very appreciative of what I had done. They were able to check their records once given the name of the suspect, who was not a tribal member. They found associates on the reservation of this person and gave us addresses on the reservation to go to. Very, very helpful in attempting to locate the suspect. Just like with any other community, if something serious is going on in other communities, we make phone calls to make sure schools are shut down, and we need to do that when we're dealing with serious crimes on the reservations also.
Good communications and agreements between law enforcement and tribal governments lead to effective cooperative policing. In this segment, we will examine the different types of cooperative agreements and how they benefit law enforcement. And we will also discuss the tribal court system.
5012 Station C, I'll be making a traffic stop on a black Kia Rio.
Ah, shit. I hope they don't find my dope. Ah! Shit!
Today.
Hey!
You know why I pulled you over?
No.
You don't have a license plate, rear license plate.
Is that illegal?
Yes, it's a travel code violation.
All right. Sorry. Okay, it won't happen again. See ya.
Hey, relax, partner. Okay, just relax.
All right.
Smell a little bit of marijuana in here.
No, you probably do.
You smoked marijuana today?
Yeah, I did.
How long ago?
Oh God. An hour, maybe? I don't know. I can't remember.
About an hour ago?
Yeah.
What's that little baggie in there? The little white substance.
Baggie? Oh, that's like a fat pack.
Is it fat?
No, it's not. What? That's not. It's not meth. I'm telling you, it's not.
It's not meth. Okay. Okay. I tell you what. Go ahead. Step out of the car for me real quick.
I would love to. I would love to.
You have drugs or weapons on you?
Nope.
Just relax, partner. Relax. Stop right there, partner. No drugs or weapons on you,
nope,
right?
Nope. Not at all.
Okay. Do me a favor. Go ahead. Turn around. Your back facing me. There
that?
you go. There you go.
Great.
Put your hands behind your back.
Like this?
No, other way.
Like that?
Yeah. Interlock your fingers. There you go. Relax. Don't move around.
All right.
Okay. Spread your legs a little bit for me. Any needles, anything like that's gonna poke me?
No.
Nothing like that's gonna poke me, right?
No.
Sure about that?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay. All right. Just relax, okay?
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So you're telling me you don't have any drugs in the car, right?
No. Yeah, I do.
Okay, what is it?
I don't know. It's like white and powdery and stuff. Probably something pretty bad.
Methamphetamine?
Could be. It sounds
Okay.
like meth.
Okay. I tell you what, for my safety for myself, I'm the only officer out here. I'm going to go ahead and handcuff you, okay?
Great plan. Great
All right,
idea.
So just relax for a second.
Okay.
Okay, let's go over here. We're going to come over here. Relax, relax. Go ahead, have a seat on your butt.
Right here?
Yeah, go ahead, have a seat on your
right.
butt. Cross
Okay.
your legs, cross
All
your
right.
legs.
Like,
Yeah, there you go. Cross your legs and don't move.
Like
Yeah,
that?
just leave it like there, partner.
all right, great.
501, Tribal Police, county call.
Go ahead, 501.
Can you send one deputy out here? I have someone under influence of drugs, and he possibly has controlled substance in his vehicle.
Copy, 501.
You have any identification on you?
Yep. Nope. It's in the car.
What part of the car is it at?
In the visor.
You have no objections to me retrieving it? Ow! Okay, hold on here, partner.
What's up, Jerry? What can I help you with?
Hey, Tom, thanks for coming down. Basically, I pulled this guy over for a tribal code violation. He didn't have a rear license plate. And as I approached the vehicle, I could smell the aroma of marijuana.
Okay.
And I asked him if he smoked any marijuana today. He said about an hour ago he smoked some. In plain view, I saw a white baggie with a white crystallized substance on the floorboard. I asked him what that was, and he admitted it was meth. Pulled him around in front of my patrol car, did a quick pat-down search, didn't find any weapons like that. Handcuffed him, put him down, and then I called you.
Okay. Looks like he's pretty 11-5 on drugs, huh?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Just spun out?
Yes, I do have his ID. If I was wondering if you could do a quick...
Yeah. Just run him real quick?
Run him real quick for me, and then we could go from there.
Let me know what you need.
Okay,
I'll start this real quick.
All right, thank you very much.
I guess we'll put him in my car for now, I guess, yeah?
Outstanding.
Does that work?
That'll work.
52 Paul 1 an inquiry for 1.
52 Paul 1, go ahead.
52 Paul 1, can I get a 29 both ways, 4th and L1 check? Subject last of Hall, 1st of Thomas, common spelling, middle of Eugene, with the DOB of 12, 23, 74, 74.
Copy.
Okay. Thomas? How you doing?
Yeah,
hey,
great.
My name is Deputy Wilson. I'm gonna have you take a seat in my car real quick, okay? All right, stand up for me. You'll be hooked up already, right?
Yeah, he's ready.
Okay. Let's walk over here. All right. Nothing illegal on you at all?
No.
My partner miss anything? Spread your feet out for me. Oh, relax, man. Nothing illegal on you, right?
Nope.
All right. Nothing hidden anywhere here?
Nope. Nope.
All right. Just take a seat real quick. I'll get back to you, okay? What about probation or parole? You on probation or parole for anything?
No.
No? Been locked up for anything before?
No.
Okay. You use any street drugs today?
Yeah.
Yeah? All right. Sit tight. Show me what you got.
Tom, when I approached the car, when I was talking to the subject, I saw the white clear plastic baggie right there with that white substance.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, it looks like it's crystallized. Okay. That's where the meth's located, supposedly.
Right there in plain view, huh?
Right in plain view.
Okay. All right, well, I'll go work on your booking sheet for you.
Okay, and I'll call for a tow truck, and then I'll search the vehicle.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. 501, the county call.
Go ahead, 501.
Could you go ahead and send a tow truck to my location? Impounding a vehicle.
Copy, 501.
Great. Perfect. This is definitely meth.
All right.
Hey, Tom, this is the only thing I found. This white crystalline substance. Appears to be methamphetamine. So.
Stick that in the bag and I'll take it and do the presumptive on it, impound it.
Outstanding.
Okay. You take this to the trunk. You need to talk to him?
Yes, I'm going to tell him. Mr. Hall, you know why you're under arrest, right? For a state law and a tribal code violation. Possession of methamphetamine and being under influence of a drug or substance. Understand? Okay, what's going to happen now is the deputy's going to take you down to jail. You have any questions? No questions? All right. Take care.
Hey, good arrest, man.
Thanks, Tom.
Here's my number and my email. Just when you get the report done, whenever it's done,
okay,
shoot it over to me, and I'll talk to the detectives. If you have any questions about the prosecution or anything, give me a call.
Outstanding. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for coming down.
Take care.
Appreciate it.
All right.
In that scenario that we just viewed, you saw the tribal police officer wait for the deputy to assist him to stand by with the suspect so the deputy himself can say he watched the tribal officer enter the car. And then afterwards, they worked together by securing the suspect and divvied up the responsibilities. That's how it really works out there, that the deputy would take the body, fill out the booking sheet, the face sheet, and then you would have the tribal officer writing his report also.
Cooperative agreements between law enforcement and tribal governments will improve services on Indian lands and can also make the peace officer's job easier and safer.
Cooperative policing, to me, is one of those areas and subjects that's extremely important within this whole matter that we're discussing. And that is for the line staff or deputies who are responding. These agreements and these areas of cooperation should be worked out in advance, because you will see these same problems and issues come up again and again and again. What my tribe has done is we have worked out an agreement with our county in order for them to help us and for us to help them. We agreed to adopt their county policy so that when the officer does come to our reservation, he doesn't have to have a second book or another set of laws for him to apply. He knows that the same law that applies off the reservation now applies on the reservation in that particular case. So those, to me, are success stories on what counties, law enforcement agencies, and tribes can do when we all sit down collectively.
In our particular case, and this was the first time this has ever happened in the state of California, I was able to develop an MOU, or Memorandum of Understanding, with our local sheriff's department to accept our prisoners. At first it was our federal prisoners, and secondly it became any that we would necessarily arrest on state violations. Most recently, and it was very exciting, we were able to sign an MOU, or Memorandum of Understanding, with our local district attorney, with which the district attorney will accept our cases directly. So now, as a police department, I have reports I can send to the district attorney for prosecution. I have a sheriff's department that will accept my prisoners for booking.
Palm Springs Police Department meets with tribal security every few months, and we go over issues, talk about things we can do better. I know that our city council has joint council sessions with the tribal council. Those are infrequent, but it's a great opportunity to share ideas and information.
It's important, just like it would be for any deputy sheriff within a sheriff's agency, to train with their fellow deputies, and you have standard procedures and how you do certain things. So, if you're doing a felony car stop, I'm going to be here, you go there. And so the same thing needs to happen with the tribal officer. In many cases on tribal lands, it's one deputy, one tribal officer may be the only people that are on duty, and you rely on them to back each other up. Simple thing is, like, if I am backing up the tribal officer and I'm at his car and I need to get his shotgun out, or I need to do something in that car, that I know where that switch is, how that radio works, and vice versa. So those are really important issues. You need to work together, have open communication on a constant basis so you understand how each other operates and what your standard policies and procedures are. And most importantly, I think, is to dovetail them so that they are very similar, if not the same, just like you would between law enforcement agencies.
When we initially began, there were 4 or 5 tribal police departments, and the last count I had, there were about 25 now. And some of those tribes have really developed a vision for where they want to see their public safety go. And we're interested in helping them get there through education, through cooperation. We're interested in seeing them work with their local law enforcement agencies to develop MOUs or develop the special law enforcement commissions if that's what they choose to do. And I think we'd like to be able to continue that educational role in Indian country by giving them the type of information that they need to exercise the very best option for how they want to address their public safety goals.
The tribal court system has grown over the last few years. In addition to tribal courts, some tribes now have jails and correctional facilities.
It's real important for law enforcement to be aware that part of the tribal sovereignty of tribes is they have the authority and the ability to establish their own court system. And it's so important to understand that law enforcement personnel are going to see tribal court orders relative to domestic violence, restraining orders. They're going to see paternity orders. They're going to see divorce papers and so forth. They're going to be issued by tribal courts. And federal law says you will give full faith and credit, to the tribal courts.
Over the last decade, a number of tribes in Southern California have gathered together to form the Intertribal Court of Southern California. A number of tribes in Northern California have created their own tribal court system.
You can actually, in terms of punitive action, you have the ability to incarcerate up to a year in a jail and up to a $5,000 fine in tribal courts. And I can guarantee you that law enforcement needs to be aware of that, because if you come onto a reservation, you subject yourself to the jurisdiction of that tribal court as well. And so, there will be times that you may be asked to come and testify in tribal courts. And so when you get that subpoena, it's just like any other subpoena.
The tribes have decriminalized certain things and made them civil regulatory. By decriminalizing, for instance, in a state court, illegal hunting, illegal fishing, illegal a whole series of other illegal things are criminal. In tribal court, they're civil. So the tribal court, while it hasn't exerted criminal jurisdiction, it can now exert the civil regulatory, because they're not criminally prohibitive, they're civil regulatory. So you find things like speeding, you find things like gun charges, certain types of brandishing weapons or shooting weapons off illegally. You find these now at the tribal level civil regulatory. So the tribe exerts jurisdiction. But you may also be prosecuted on the criminal side by the state, so that you can be prosecuted literally twice. Once in a civil regulatory vein with the tribe, and once in a criminal vein.
And if a deputy was to observe or at least be at an incident where tribal law enforcement were present, and it was a violation of both California law and that tribe's peace and security ordinance, the individual could get a ticket, a criminal citation under the penal code, and also be held under a civil citation by that tribe's law enforcement.
We've come to the end of our telecourse. On behalf of the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, we appreciate your participation. Now let's listen to the final thoughts from our subject matter experts.
The most important thing for officers to understand about Public Law 280 is that it is a very distinctive form of law enforcement dealing with a separate community that has its own governmental system, that may have its own police and justice system, and that it's very important to work cooperatively between these two sets of authorities.
At whatever point we can reach that clear understanding that tribal governments are the same as local governments and should be afforded the same courtesies, the same respect, then we will have truly made progress in PL 280.
When you drive onto that reservation, it's not like driving into another city. You're actually driving into a whole different culture, and you need to respect that.
You are dealing with families. When you come on a reservation, everybody is related, and so we are all a family, so we are very emotional and very concerned for each person there, and so, just a little understanding of that, and we understand what you're doing, that you're doing a job, and it's maybe not something we like, but has to be done.
When they come on the reservation, it's like coming into our home, and this is our space, and this is our security. and we would just want you to come in and be sensitive to us. And we know that you're there to do your job, and that is to serve and protect us. And we appreciate that. We appreciate you folks coming to help us. We can't do this alone. You know, we all need to work together, and we have no problem with that.
Don't be afraid to go out to those communities and introduce yourself. Don't be afraid to go out there and shake somebody's hand, because American Indians like to introduce themselves and shake their hands. Let's shake people's hands.
And to me, it's a priceless investment to get out and meet people in that tribal community and to take the time to let people know you.
For the officers around the state that are dealing with Native peoples, be a good listener. Hear what they're saying. Think before you speak, and accept where they came from.
It's a wonderful opportunity to provide services to people that will truly be appreciative of what they receive.
If you get to know the people in your area that you work with, and you know them on a first-name basis, those people will become your friends because you've broken down the barriers that exist between you and them. And they will protect you just like you were one of them, because you are one of them.